Welcome once again to the official MUFON podcast. I'm your host, Richard Beckwith. Tonight, my guest is Debbie Ziegelmeyer. Debbie is a member of the MUFON Board of Directors, and she's the Missouri MUFON State Director. She is a MUFON Star Team investigator and a MUFON benefactor. She is also the founder of the MUFON Dive Team. Debbie is an open water scuba instructor, first responder, underwater UFO USO search and recovery instructor, master scuba instructor, and rescue diver instructor. She also holds scuba instructor specialties in deep diver, underwater navigation, boat diving, night diving, wreck diving, underwater search and recovery, underwater photography, enriched air, altitude diving, drift diving, and she is an instructor for divers with special needs. She spent over 10 years partnered with her brother Chuck Zukowski, reinvestigating the Roswell, New Mexico incident of 1947, and she worked with Ted Phillips' group for 2 years, investigating and researching Marley Woods, and has been a MUFON field investigator for over 10 years, investigating over 1,000 UFO sighting reports. Debbie has been an amateur astronomer since childhood, and she has a 10-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope housed in an astronomical dome in her backyard. In the summer months, she conducts scuba diving and water safety seminars for children's groups and teaches children's scuba camps. Debbie also owns Missouri Scuba LLC, and along with her firefighter son-in-law, Roger Meyer, teaches scuba diving to St. Louis City and surrounding county firefighters. My friend, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really happy to have you here. I want to talk to you about all kinds of things because I know you've got an extensive background in hunting UFOs, and I love that because I love hunting UFOs. And, the world should know that we are fellow board members. We're both members of the MUFON board, but we don't know any big, deep, dark secrets. All we do is do the business of MUFON, and that's it. We don't have any pieces of flying saucer in the safe in the hangar 1 or whatever, So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you do and the kinds of things that you've investigated, because you've got an extensive background in this. And yeah, you've been doing it a really long time, and you've done a bunch of different kinds of things, and you've had some involvement in some cases that I have found personally very interesting and compelling. In particular, the Roswell case. You had some things to do with that, with reinvestigating that, along with your brother Chuck. So tell us a little bit, first of all, Debbie, about your background. Tell us about your diving background.
Oh, diving. Well, actually, let me start with a background on how I got into this, and it'll lead into the diving. I grew up in Safford, Arizona, went first grade through freshman year of high school, and I was right at the foot of the Graham Mountain, which now the Graham Mountain is the mountain that houses Lucifer, the Catholic's telescope. The Catholic Church has a telescope, Lucifer. So you could tell just from that how vivid the sky was. So I always had a telescope. My brother Chuck always had a telescope between the two of us. And that's how we became interested in stargazing, which moved on through Star Trek and Lost in Space and all those type of TV shows. I moved from there to California for a couple of years and then on to Missouri. Fortunate in Missouri for being here because we're one of the hot spots in the country. Diving, how I started in diving was I was certified the weekend after 9/11. It was interesting because my son had gone through a divorce, and my husband asked him what he would like to do to try and start life again. And he said, well, I want to learn how to dive. So he and my husband became divers. They got so excited. My husband bought me the equipment, and that's how I got kind of thrown into it. I was the worst diver out there on my open water dive, my first dive actually out of a pool. I passed out at 22 feet. I hyperventilated and passed out. I was scared to death. Wow. And I don't like being afraid of anything. And if you know me, I'm stubborn. And so I went back the following week and not only took my certification, completed it, but I was such a bad diver, I just kept taking more and more classes. And before I knew it, I was an instructor. So in 2003, I was going through dive master classes, and that's where I met my son-in-law, who is my business partner in scuba diving now. And at the time, he was not my son-in-law. My family didn't even know him, but that's a whole other story. But I started teaching underwater UFO search and recovery classes. And I taught one in 2003, one in 2004. We had this training quarry. We hid UFOs all underwater, all over the place in this quarry, and put a 10-foot in diameter satellite dish down there. So that's how the dive team was formed. I at one point had divers from all over the country, all over the crunchy, all over the world. I had divers from various countries in the world that all volunteered to be MUFON divers. Somewhere along the way, the dive team kind of faded out. We didn't have a lot of sightings. We're limited to 130 feet as a recreational diver. But now that took me to the research of all that's going on underwater. 70% of the Earth is water. And what a great place to hide things. And that was my focus. Everybody, somehow, when you're in this field, and you know that, Richard, you get in this field, somehow you find your niche. And my niche is water. So I started researching everything that had to do with water. I met Carl Feint, who wrote a couple great books and was an expert. Very wonderful man, taught me a lot. We spent, a lot of times at MUFON symposiums, just an hour or two just comparing notes. But that's kind of how I got into the water thing. I accidentally fell into it, and then I realized there aren't that many people out there researching water. And then now this is what's coming out on TV. The government's releasing video taken from Navy pilots, UFOs over water.
Coming out of the water.
Well, over it, coming out of it. I mean, the ones from the Nimitz, I think they said there were, they had been watching those for a couple days. There were several. Mm-hmm. They said they probably as many as 200, but they know for sure they were in groups of 8 and 10. And this one in particular just dove right down. This was in 2004 from F-18 pilots were taking this video. So this was right over the water. It was skimming the water, going, I believe it was about, 100 knots, about 115 miles an hour. But that has a lot to do with, especially the area. The area is very active. It's about 100 miles out from San Diego. And Catalina Island is just, there are so many sightings in and around Catalina Island, and those go back. We can get into that. I don't know how much, if you want me to go right into that, but...
well, I'm curious about how you feel about things like the possibility of underwater bases, extraterrestrial underwater bases, even, underground bases, that sort of thing.
Well, with water, I've everything is speculation until we're actually down there and we have the proof. But there is so much coming in and out of the water in so many different places all over the world, so many water sightings that I'm beginning to focus on the areas where there's the most activity. There's definitely something right in around San Diego, in that area, someplace between Los Angeles and San Diego. There's something out there in the ocean. There's got to be some type of a base. If not a base, maybe we're thinking too, I guess, like physical, that there physically has to be a base. Does there? Or is that a wormhole they're coming in and out of? Are they coming in and out a time portal? I'm almost thinking there is something down there, but I believe there are some kind of pyramid-shaped mountains in that area. And very easily, just from UFO sighting reports that we have seen, we've heard about, things that people have reported for years and years and years, there could very well be an opening in one of these mountains where it just opens and then shuts. You can go down there with a submarine and not see a thing. These are at depth, too. The Pacific Ocean is really deep. And if you have a craft that can travel light years, through space and then enter the water without being damaged, because you know what happens if a plane enters the water. It's not, it doesn't go well for the plane. Then there isn't any reason why these craft can't enter the water, travel with speed through the water, and maybe there's some type of an opening where they just, because you've heard of abduction cases where people say these aliens come through the wall. They come through their wall, they take them through the wall, take them through the roof. Well, if they've got the technology to do that on a small basis, why isn't there the technology feasibly that they're underwater, they get to something, it opens up, it closes up, there's some kind of a base.
Debbie, I've had this discussion with a couple of my guests, and I've been reading about these cases that were considered altogether as something called the friendship case, these books by a guy named Stefano Breccia, and he talks about technology that these aliens that he purports to have had contact with, that they had this kind of technology that you're talking about, that there were no stable entrances to their bases, and they had them all over. They were underwater, under the Mediterranean Sea and so forth, but they didn't have stable entrances. They had a technology where if they needed to go in and out of the base, they simply opened up an opening to get there, and then the opening would close behind them. It was the same technology used to actually build the bases. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but
briefly, things for underground in mountains. I've heard of a couple different mountains where Alaska, there's a mountain in Alaska where I've heard they've seen that in a place in Colorado. But the more I thought about it, we're not finding bases underwater because of that. I mean, it is, like I said, that's how they abduct people. People go through ceilings and walls all the time and end up in a field. I mean, on a larger basis, absolutely. That would make a lot of sense. But that's one alien race. There could be a different alien race. Maybe they're just using it as a wormhole. So you can't think one-sided. You have to think there are several different types of aliens, several different alien races that are visiting us.
Yes.
And I believe they're coming through in several different ways. Some of them could actually have some kind of a physical craft underwater, if anything, and it's such depth. We're not capable of going down to that depth, or something to where if maybe they're found out about, they can move. So I think there's a lot of different possibilities, but I think one of the most feasible would be, the opening. And then we're talking too about how they enter the water. Carl Feint and I had a discussion about that. And his theory was that electromagnetic field that you can see that causes us problems as investigators. We're always asking, was there any EMF? And, my car stalled out and the lights went out and the lights blinked and I had this radiation burn. But that electromagnetic field that is around these craft, they move in and out of our atmosphere with ease. There's no sonic boom. They're moving in and out of the water with ease, and they're moving through the water, which are called fast movers. And I have a couple different people who have been in submarines that have told me about fast movers where they pick them up on sonar and they're just going through at a high rate of speed and nobody knows what they do, and they just kind of log it and stow it, and that's it. They're not ever touching the water. These craft are surrounded by this electromagnetic field, which is moving them with ease through the water. I mean, and that was something that Carl and I talked about.
Yeah, it's something that that Lou Elizondo talked to us about. It's one of the 5 observables, excuse me, where multi-medium travel. They can travel equally well in space, in the atmosphere, and in water, which is just clearly something beyond our technology. Unless you remember that TV show from the 60s where they had the flying sub. Remember that?
Oh, right. Yeah. But still, if you think about it, some of these craft that are cigar shaped, how do we know they're not coming in and out of the water? I mean, and look at the Tic Tac. What was a Tic Tac? I mean, it's like a small submarine type shape. So, yeah.
Yeah, and
Makes a lot of sense.
I think those pilots actually said that they observed what appeared to be a large craft just under the water, that one of these objects was actually orbiting around, kind of making really erratic movements around this submerged object as they were on their way out to see these, to meet these Tic Tacs. It's amazing.
It is. I mean, and the sightings, the sightings aren't just recent. We're recently being, enlightened by our government. We knew all this for years. But most people most people don't think about UFOs. It really surprises me. There's so much out there when I do an investigation and this person would see something legitimate that is an actual, not a planet, not a star, not a satellite, not the space station. And they're in shock. We almost have to be a psychologist as well as an investigator just to get these people through this experience and say, okay, you're okay. This is fine. This is going on. Most people just don't know about it, because I've been working on a case now for 2 years. And I think at this point, I think I'm at 9 witnesses, and I think 11 different investigators have been out to this area with me, and it's in and around water. It's a little town, in Missouri, I guess, kind of southern, mid-central in Missouri, but a little bit south, not too far, about 40 miles from me. And there are strange balls of light coming in and out of the river, out of the Merrimack River, there's another area, they're coming in and out of the Mississippi River. And I've got video of this. We have no idea. We've been investigating this, and we have that many witnesses. They're saying, okay, I saw this. I mean, a woman who says, well, I'm retired and I make preserves. I do my canning and stuff. I mean, this isn't somebody who is out there walking around with a colander on her head trying to flag in UFOs. This is a woman that just went outside her backyard and she goes, what is that? And the neighbor said, did you see that? There was something coming in and out of the water. I've got video of things going around the trees, things that I can't at this point explain, so I don't want to talk too much about it because it's still an ongoing investigation. But, we were talking about water and about oceans, too. Most people don't realize, you brought up Roswell. Roswell was 1947. Best we can figure around July 4th, July 5th, depending on the witness. July 7th, 1947, there were a couple teenagers that saw some craft similar to what Kenneth Arnold saw, going right over Catalina Island in California. And the following day, on July 8th, there were 3 military, I think they were from the Navy, there were 3 military guys that were outside partying at Catalina Island. If you know anything about California and Catalina Island, it's a little party island. And they looked up and saw the same type of craft go over. And this was the day after Roswell. Just going through the archives, the MUFON archives, there were sightings that whole week, all the way from Kenneth Arnold was that the 25th of June? I mean, they went a week after the Roswell incident. There were all across the United States, there were sightings. But I thought it was interesting that way back then in Catalina Island, and there's been multiple sightings. There's pictures. I'm finally going to put all this in a book. I'm on like chapter 3, so I haven't gotten into it. It's all up in here, and it's all in my notes. But there's so much out there that there needs to be one place where people can just go to a book and realize the extent of the sightings and the extent of what's going on in our waterways, because it's pretty scary.
Let me ask you this, Debbie. With respect to the water cases that you've dealt with and the water cases that you've historically looked at, how many of those cases involve entities?
Well, there was Lake Bacile. I had the date written down here. It was out of Russia, and there was an encounter between, I believe it was about a dozen military. They were basically the equivalent of Navy SEALs, Russian Navy SEALs that were training in this lake. and they came upon some alien creatures down at depth. They were pretty deep. These divers were farther down than a recreational diver would be. They were doing hard training and came upon these creatures. And from what the reports are, about, I think 7 were killed and 5 were severely injured trying to capture these creatures. So, I mean, that's just one case in particular. You know, it's a very mysterious lake. There's wildlife in the lake that aren't found anywhere else. It's one of the large, I believe it is the largest freshwater lake in the world. You've got Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, Canada. The craft, apparently a craft, hit the water and sank. A lot of people saw it. They were out there boats were trying to get to this craft before it sank. It left, they thought it was a plane hit the water. It left a yellow foam on the water that nobody thought to take a sample of. That craft, when it sunk, it ended up moving, I believe, 12 miles or so. It moved down the coast, and another craft apparently met up with it. According to some reports that I have, there were, and Chris Stiles, according to his book, some research, he did the great research on that. Chris found that there were some Navy divers that were down there that saw creatures working on this craft. And what's interesting is that a Russian submarine showed up in the area, and they finally, both of the craft, the second one that came to assist the first one, both took off. I think they went along the coast several miles and then took off back into the air at a different place several miles down the road. I mean, so that's a story that could go on and on and on. I mean, that's
you know what that reminds me of is Phil Schneider. Remember Phil Schneider?
Yes.
The guy that I guess he was an engineer, and he got lowered down into that hole and found the alien bases and had the scars to prove it.
I found a couple cases that are people in California that were abducted and taken to some kind of an underwater base. So there's a couple of those. As far as creatures, that's a whole segment of just abduction. I try and stick more with the actual craft. My expertise is more water and trying to gain physical evidence, and then I leave the abduction cases and that type of thing to Kathy Martin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only be an expert in so much, and I've already got water, and I've already got Roswell. I investigated Roswell for 20 years. I was speaking to somebody yesterday about that, and I was amazed at sadly how many people are gone from all the original witnesses. I knew Glenn Dennis, the mortician. I knew Walter Hott, the information officer. There was he was Airman Sharkey, who was standing guard and saw the plane at the end of the runway that they were loading the boxes to. A witness that referred to himself as Eli, who said that we were in Hangar 84 and said that's where the craft pieces were. 3 bodies were laying over there. Jesse Marcel Jr., sadly, to see him pass a couple years ago. Wonderful man. Wonderful. Loved Mexican food. My brother and I were the only ones that ever took him out to the debris field he'd never been. So it's like...
Let's not forget about Ted Phillips either. He investigated that. Yeah.
Ted, I was an investigator for Ted on his team for a couple years.
Marley Woods.
The research at Marley Woods, the research is still going on right now because of COVID. Of course not. But there's things still going on there, which is interesting because I did videotape a couple of balls of light from Marley Woods. I was there. I was out there, I think, 5 or 6 different times, and I think it was the 3rd time I was out there for a 4-day weekend before I actually saw something. Marley's about 4 hours from me. Marley Woods is just a hair off of the 37-degree latitude line. The St. Clair area, St. Clair, Piedmont, all that, we're at 37 degrees.
Well, let's talk about that. You're springing that on us all of a sudden. So let's get into that a little bit. You have this.
There's so much.
You have this interest in the 37th parallel. I think that it's been referred to the 37th latitude line, and so
right.
37th degree. Why is that? Why are you interested? And why do you? Are there things that you think are happening along this particular corridor, or? And explain what the 37th parallel is for our listeners.
And I know we're jumping around a lot, but that's how UFO sightings are. Yeah. 1 minute you've got all these triangles over here, and the next minute you've got all these balls of light over here, and then the next minute everything's coming in and out of the water, and it's all within Missouri or another state. I know Missouri because that's where I work out of, and where I live. I happened to be one night, we were getting cow mutilations in Missouri, and this was 2010, 11, 12, right around there. And I was on the phone to my brother. We started mapping them out, and he said, something's going on here. He said, the ones that he lives in Colorado Springs. He said, all of these in Colorado, we were mapping them across the whole area, across Oklahoma. And he said, oh my gosh. I mean, Chuck looked at it. He said, this is 37 degree latitude. What have you got on 37 degree latitude? So there we are at 1:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh, Piedmont. Piedmont's there. Oh my gosh, it was a Hartville. The cases that I was working on were all along that line, all the cow mutilations. There was only one, well, there were two that I worked on. One that was more closer to Kansas City, and then one was Shelbyville, Illinois. I worked on that for Samaranto. But we were finding that the activity was along that line for these cow mutilations. So then we started comparing activity, the sites, the heightened activity, and the frequency of these. And we found that there was a lot of activity going around that area. I did research on it, found out Missouri was the cave state, which at the time I didn't know. And there were a lot of caves in Colorado, and it seemed like there were a lot of caves right around the place where they had the cow mutilations. Went back and did research and found out in the late 1800s there was a cow mutilation in Missouri. It made one of their newspapers in the late 1800s. But most of the cow mutilations, the animal mutilations, started up around the late 60s to 72, 73.
I remember.
Those were investigated originally by Linda Moulton Howe. But they're still going on. We have an investigator down in the Salem area who's right on that 37 degree. He has seen a craft hovering over Salem, Missouri. He came out of his office. He's a chiropractor, looked up and said, whoa, what is that? He's investigated. It's so great. His patients come in and they tell him about sightings. We had a craft a couple years ago that went all the way from, I think it was from the Carolinas, kitty corner across the United States and ended up in Washington. And Emmett was the only investigator, the MUFON investigator, that actually saw this thing. It was a roll of lights, and it traveled across the country within a couple hours. It was amazing. And that was because one of his patients called and said, go outside, Emmett, and he did, and he saw it. So Emmett's along that line, and he has reports of pig mutilation, sheep. So it's not just cows. One of the ones Chuck investigated was a dog, some horses. So it's not just, the majority is cow, and we discussed that and wondered why. And I don't know if you realize, but during World War II, there was a shortage of blood in Europe, transfusions for the soldiers, and they were using bovine blood.
Yes.
The blood's always missing, so maybe that's some kind of a connection. But as far as you go back into the 70s, you go back into the 18 or late 1900s, I've seen the cuts. These are laser cuts. If you've ever tried to take a knife and cut your leather shoe, it's not an easy thing to do, and to make a smooth cut. So that's something else that I have no idea what that could possibly be, but I know that it's not people out there just that this isn't some kind of a ritual.
It's not a cult.
No, not any kind of a ritual or a cult, or they wouldn't be doing that. I mean, if that's what they wanted to do, they would just take a knife and open up the chest and take out the heart. But this stuff is surgically removed. the whole side of a face. I had one in Hartville, Missouri. I believe it was 2008 in the winter of 2008, and the cow was sitting on ice with not a drop of blood on the ice. The side of its whole face was gone. The whole side of its head was gone. Its tongue was gone. Its udder was gone. Laser cut off. But this cow was sitting. We'd had an ice storm and was sitting on top of the ice, and there wasn't a drop of blood on the ice.
Yes, we've had many of those cases here in Wyoming. Those cattle mutilation cases, especially during the time period that you're talking about, with precisely the same sorts of issues. You know, the very precise surgical cuts, and you would have those individuals that would say, well, that's clearly being done by predators, but you could, upon close examination, tell that the incisions being made were highly specific to particular parts of the body and surgically made. They weren't, you know, when a predator goes after something, it really rips it apart. There isn't really a lot of discrimination about where it's chewing. Of course, it goes for the softest parts first, but yeah.
Well, I talked to the veterinarian on one of these cases, and he, you know, I told him, I said, this is a laser cut. This isn't some coyote that came, mountain lion that came, or a bear that came, took this cow down and did that. And when I asked him if he'd send me a copy of his report, and I met him there along with the rancher. And when the report came in, the cow's death was listed as animal cruelty. Now, he wouldn't admit to anything else. And I said, what do you mean?
Whoever did it was being cruel.
He goes, well, it could have been a predator. And I said, a predator you would list it as lunch or dinner. You wouldn't list it as animal cruelty.
Yeah.
That insinuates intelligent life.
Someone did it.
Some type of intelligent life did that. So I thought that was interesting. There's, you know, you have to be a little bit of an expert in everything, you know, have enough knowledge and everything, because you never know. You could be, you know, 1 minute we're out there on an investigation of some kind of a craft, and then before we knew it, we look at video and there's a face of an alien, or there's fingerprints. And then the following week, somebody says, well, you know, there was a cow mutilated over here. This is the whole phenomenon. It will get you hooked. You know, I started this 20 years ago officially for MUFON, and I was probably working on this 5 or 6 years before. I was always interested in a kid, but I was never able to put my heart and soul into it. I raised an athlete. And so for you parents out there, you know, I wasn't a soccer mom, but the equivalent to where, you know, it was, you know, get the kid from school, you know, work the job so you can put your child through, you know, pay for all the equipment and for the traveling and that type of thing. And then when she grew up and, you know, she retired from the sport and she took it as far as she wanted to take it, then all of a sudden I was kind of left, and I thought, well, you know, this is what I've been doing on the side, and I threw myself into it. And thankfully for MUFON, it was in MUFON's direction. Because
we've really benefited from that. I think your intense interest in it.
Benefited from my obsessions, I guess. I mean, it's not really an obsession. You know, you look, you know, as an investigator, I look at a case, and I have a couple other investigators that are brand new, and we look at these cases, and we're thinking, you know, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you go, wait a minute, it could have been that. Sometimes you just can't put it aside. And it leads to a better and a better and a better investigation. But there's just so much out there.
Let me ask you this, Debbie. In all the years that you've been chasing UFOs, and I think I know the answer to this question, but in all the years that you've been chasing these things, have you actually seen some things yourself that you say, wow, that is a UFO? I can't believe I'm actually seeing this. Have you had those experiences?
The first one was about 1980. I was grocery shopping. The wind was blowing, 2:00 in the afternoon, and we had a pickup truck. I got the groceries loaded in the back of the truck. My husband was in a store with the kids. And I looked up, and it looked like this, like my fingernails, that size, about 60 degrees in the sky, sunny day, blue sky, two silver metallic, one on top of the other objects. Didn't move. Now, my hair was whipping in the wind, and these things didn't move. My son, I didn't have a camera in 1980. I didn't have any kind. It wasn't there, cell phone. You didn't have that. All the way home, we could still see them in the sky, like when you're driving and you can see the moon in the sky. They came on the news that night. The neighbors were all outside looking, and they came out and said, well, it was two weather balloons that escaped from Texas. Stationary in the sky. 2007, I was coming home from a dive instructor class, and that was in April of 2007, and I got out of my Jeep, and there was something exactly the size of my cell phone at the time, which was about the size of maybe, like a Snicker bar, a rectangle, with a red light on each of the four corners and a red light in the middle, that big, right over my head, just moving. And I watched it, and I thought, well, if I go in and try and get a camera, I'm going to miss where it went. So and of course, my cell phone in 2007 did not have a camera. And I watched this thing that didn't make a sound, and it went just right across into the trees. I got in my Jeep and tried to go around the woods and everything and hunt it down, and I didn't see where it was. Mm-hmm. But, and then we saw, I guess it was a craft in Roswell in 2016.
Tell us about that.
Well, my brother and I, we were in Roswell, and they had an alien ball. Okay, so they have all these people that dress up like aliens, and we said, we're in Roswell again, which I think I've been there more than 20 times. My brother and I have been there a lot. We went out toward what they refer to as the Ragsdale site. Thought we'd go out there. It's supposed to be a mysterious section of highway. My brother is Chuck Zukowski. He was on the show Alien Highway. He lives in Colorado Springs. And so we went out to this site, and we backed into one of those, I guess they're a rancher gate, the big gate that they swing open, and then you go in and you lock the gate behind you to get into your ranch. They leave enough room so you can park your pickup truck and open the gate. You're not blocking the highway. So we backed into one of those. And he says, oh, looky here, I got brand new LED lights on my new pickup truck. And so was a row of lights across. He goes, I've got a remote control. So he hits the remote control, and it flashes on and off. And he goes, oh, look, I did a sequence. And he hits it, and it goes flash, 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 pause, flash. And we looked up, and I guess at about maybe 70 degrees in the sky, this thing that looked like bigger than what you would see Jupiter in the sky, like you took a little aspirin and just placed it right on the sky. Bright white with a little bit of a yellowish tint, flashed back at us twice. Flash, flash. And he said, did you see that? And I said, yes, I did. And he goes, well, is that a drone? Or I said, that's no. And he said, is it a plane? I said, no. And he goes, well, I think it's something behind that cloud. I said, that's the Milky Way. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I said, hit the remote again. He hit that remote again and did the same sequence, the front of his truck, these LED lights, and the same thing happened. It didn't shake or move or anything. It was just there. Flash, flash.
Oh, my God.
And he's like, okay, what is this? Well, I said, well, it was so dark. I had a little camera. I've got a better camera now that's night vision, but my little night vision camera couldn't pick anything up because there wasn't any ambient light around, no light at all. It was just too dark. It wouldn't even focus. So I didn't even have my camera. He's trying to look with his binoculars. I said, hit it again. It flashed again. Same place, didn't shake. A drone in the sky will do this. It was just there. And once again, flash, flash. And he looked over at me and he says, wow, there might be something to what Stephen Greer's been saying, because you know how they take and flash these lights? Mm-hmm. We thought, no, that doesn't happen. We look at the science of this. We don't think somebody can take a light and flash it up and get any kind of a reaction. Well, it happened to us. I have no idea. I don't know what that was. We turned it in as a MUFON case. We investigated it so well, the investigator in the Roswell area said, thank you. There's not a lot else I need to do to this. He drove out to the site. He goes, there's not a tower. There's nothing out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, so now, Debbie, you've had these experiences in your life. You've actually witnessed objects in the sky that you can't necessarily explain. and you've been chasing them. And what have you learned? What do you think that you've learned what do you know now that you didn't know then?
We're definitely not alone. You know, you can watch all the UFO videos and the movies and see Close Encounters and the whole thing, and you go, yeah, that's really cool, that's really mysterious. But until you actually see something that you as an investigator, myself as an investigator, that we had myself and me and my brother, but all 3 times on those, something I absolutely couldn't explain away, because you have to understand, when I do a case, I look at it and I go, okay, what did they see? What is that? Nah. And I'm working like Marley and the other case that I'm working on now here in Missouri for a couple years. You just get to the point sometimes where, I'm at the point I don't know what that is. And it's something, we're being visited by something, and I don't care who tells me I'm crazy, who tells me they don't exist, until you have looked at something in the sky and said, there is no explanation for that. I never could, even as a child, imagine that it was just us, because I lived in an area that had a vivid sky. Where I grew up in Safford, Arizona, I could see Venus during the day. Now, I don't know, way back when I was a young child, if maybe that was the closest that Venus was to the Earth. Like we did a few years ago when we had Mars, and they said, Mars will never be this close to the Earth again. We had telescopes out, and we could see both poles. And every year they would say, Mars will never be this close to the Earth again. Well, it's moving farther and farther away, so every year it's a little bit less close. Yes. I'll have to do some research and find out if one point when I was a kid that maybe we had somehow, that maybe Venus was just the same way. We had orbited in some type of an orbit or maybe the sky is just that vivid. I don't know, but I would look up and there would be the moon and there would be Venus. So this is the kind of sky I grew up with. And I'd climb up in the middle of the night and lay on the roof of our garage and look at the stars and just dream about other worlds and other things going on. And I just knew there was somebody else. It's just, it's kind of nice to know I'm not wasting my time.
Yeah, because you're not the only one.
Oh, yeah, I'm not the only one, but you wouldn't believe the investigators out there. Like Stanton Friedman said he never saw anything. I can't even imagine that man put his whole life into this.
I think he eventually did. Did he
really finally?
Yeah, I think he did. And actually, what's kind of funny is that movie that he did with Kathleen Marden about the Betty and Barney Hill case. There is a segment of film from that movie where they're standing there in the field where this happened, and there's a group of lights that are flashing behind Stanton and Kathleen. And they actually got UFOs while they were filming the documentary, and they're happening behind Stanton. So I don't know if he had ever seen one before that, but I don't know that he actually saw one that night. But they were happening as they were filming him, and they were going off behind him.
Wow.
If you ever get a chance to watch that documentary, you should watch that, the one with Stanton and Kathleen.
Yeah, I really need to do that. I'm so involved in cases and things that have been going on that I'm focused in Missouri, and to try and go elsewhere between Missouri and still working on things in Roswell, and then investigating things sightings across the world and underwater bases. And I find out that there's so much going on out there, but I've got 3 areas that I'm focused in that it kind of monopolizes my time a little bit, or a lot.
And so what are the 3 areas that you're focused on? You're focused on
Roswell, Missouri, and underwater. Water-related, I guess it would be water-related cases across the world. I mean, we've got not only do we have a Bermuda Triangle, there is a Japanese triangle. I think it's called the Dragon Triangle.
I've heard of that, yes.
Right? There's the Alaskan Triangle, and I've worked a little bit. I've helped them out on that TV show, the Alaskan Triangle. There's Michigan has a triangle. Everybody's heard of the song Dock of the Bay. Otis Redding.
Yeah.
Otis Redding died, I believe, at 28 years old. He was going from one gig to another, traveled across Lake Michigan, and hit some of that EMF, whatever it was, the plane he was in, just did that right into the, one person survived. There's an electromagnetic field, a triangle going from across the middle of Lake Michigan, and then it kind of kitty corners down so it's a straight line across the middle, and then it kitty corners down to the opposite side of Lake Michigan from Chicago. Mm-hmm. And there are boats, ships, all kinds of stuff, things that just fall out of the sky right in that area.
Yeah. One of the things that I've thought about when we were talking about UFOs and their association with water was the Pascagoula case. You're familiar with that, right?
Yes.
The Pascagoula, Mississippi case. I think that
right.
one of the fellows died, but there's another one, Mr. Parker, I believe, is still around, and I think I may have him on the podcast at some point. But I'd like to sit down and talk to him. But I think that case happened right next to the river, and I'm curious as to your Marley Woods investigation. Was there a source of water near there, a lake or a river running through the area?
No, they had a little lake there on the property, but there were caves. So that was the one. That's one area I really don't understand. There was a little lake there. We were going to dive it. Tom Ferrario and I, we were part of the team. But as far as the activity in that whole area, no. And I had a case in. Let's see, kind of in the Mountain Grove area. Let's see, there was another, where it was an abduction case. And there were a lot of sightings in that area, Mountain Grove, Missouri. And there wasn't any water around, not a lake or a river. So, but it was 37-degree latitude.
Yes.
So, and like I said before, well, maybe the water-related cases are one or two races of aliens. Maybe the 37-degree latitude, that's somebody else.
Yeah. Have you ever heard this about water, that which relates to the paranormal, and that is that there appears to be, or it's been said that there is an increase in paranormal activity near water. Have you heard about that?
No, I don't investigate paranormal because I'm too busy investigating UFOs. It's kind of funny. I will go out and chase an alien down, but I won't go anywhere near a ghost. No part of that at all. And
they scare me too.
They scare you? That is just, at least an alien, that's somebody like me. That's just a visitor here, somebody that has come over, somebody that's got a wife and kids maybe back home, hopefully, and they're coming, maybe they're on vacation, maybe they're explorers, they're another, a physical race of another being. But this ghost thing, I don't know. This people coming back from the dead and all that, I don't want anything to do with that. It scares me.
Let me ask you about Roswell. Uh-huh. You said a minute ago that you are still really involved in what's happening at Roswell, at least your investigation at Roswell. So what is going on with you that makes you continue to look into the Roswell case? Is it not case settled yet for you? Will you? Because I'm obsessed with Roswell as well. I think a lot of people are. You clearly are much more than I am. But is the case proven, or will you not rest until the powers that be say, okay, we were wrong, it happened. The aliens came and we covered it up?
To me, the case is proven, and there's those out there who can say it's not, but till you have been there and spoken to the people and we went out to the debris field one day, just driving out there, and there was a gentleman that came by, and he says, I don't know much about that. I wasn't born, but my dad was. He says, but I can tell you this, it happened over there. He says, my daddy said it was over there. He said, yeah, they weren't from here, but they weren't green. Well, no, they were gray. My brother Chuck and I have been speaking there since, oh my gosh, maybe 2002. We started speaking. We would go every 3-day, 4-day weekend. Memorial, Labor Day weekend, 4th of July weekend, 3 weekends a year, we would go to Roswell and interview people and investigate. And we've been on two archaeology digs. I didn't know how much. I think my obsession now is the fact that we had that light that shined at us in 2016. We went back in 2017 and decided we were going to go back to the same place. Well, 2017 was the 70th anniversary. So we didn't leave at the time we wanted to leave. We wanted to leave at around 9 o'clock or so when we saw this light that flashed at us the prior year. Same date, July 3rd. Well, we ended up leaving more like 10:30 because we just couldn't get away from the reporters and we were having dinner with the Roswell Daily Record reporters. And so we ended up leaving about 10:30 instead. We have been down that highway. I could even tell you how many times, going back and forth 30 times easy. We know it. We've been there daylight, morning, evening, night, midnight. We take off down this highway, and when you get just past, you go down to the end of the main street in Roswell, you make a left-hand turn just past Walmart. You go just a little ways, there's a fork in the road. You go to the right, takes you out toward the Ragsdale site. I can see it in my mind. When we do that, we're heading out to this site again. We're driving it along, and now it's about 10:30 at night. We're driving along, and then all of a sudden, this highway that's 2-lane with a yellow line between goes to 1 lane with no lines and goes to dirt. And my brother said, did we take a wrong turn? I said, no. So I said, well, turn around. We must have, maybe we were talking and we went off a side road. So we turned around and made a U-turn, went about the length, just barely started up, and because it went to dirt, turned around, went in the other direction, and it's 1 lane. And then all of a sudden it goes back to the 2 lanes with a line. We don't go farther than the length of a football field, no roads on the side. And it turns back to 1 lane and then turns to dirt. So now he's going, well, what happened here? And I said, I don't know. So he's got this brand new truck with this big GPS thing built into it. And it says, location unknown. So we get out our phones. It says no signal. So he says, well, let's try. I said, turn around again. Now, Chuck's getting mad. He's going like, well, what the hell? We're already running late. We turned around again. I said, drive very, very slow. So he turns this big old truck around back and forth in this dirt road. We turn around, start back, just barely start back again. And there it is, the paved road. And here it comes. There's the 2 lane with the yellow line in between. And we're going slow, and we start to pick up a little speed. And then there it is, goes to 1 lane, and it turns to dirt. And he goes, oh, my God, we're trapped. He said, get out my GPS. He's got a little GPS, the little, ones everybody used to use before the phones. I get it out, and I said, it won't work. And he goes, you can't even turn this thing on. I'm like, calm down, Chuck. I go to turn it on. The batteries are dead. So I said, okay, wait a minute. We went this way. Then we went this way. Then we went this way. I said, let's head back to Walmart. I said, so if we go back one more time, take it really slow. So we turn around again, and we're going slow, and we're going slow. And then pretty soon there's the lights, and we can see Walmart. I went, okay. Here we are. So we get over to the fork in the road, and we turn around, make a U-turn. He goes, okay, now we're going in the right direction again. I said, yeah, we are. And we go along, and we're fine. Now, this is about 35 minutes outside of town. Now, you remember we left at 10:30. We barely got going, okay? We get to the site, and he said, what time is it? And I said, it's 1:30 in the morning. We were 35 minutes away. So this happened July 3rd, 2017. We stayed till about 2:33 in the morning. He goes, well, we've missed it. If that thing was going to flash at us, he said, we're too late. We've missed it. We never even thought about what happened.
It sounds like you had like 2 or 3, 4 hours of missing time.
We were figuring even if we didn't spend that much time turning around, but minimum, we lost an hour and a half of time. So we just turned around and we went back, and we were staying at a hotel because we were speakers. They put us up at a hotel. And we got up the next morning, and we're heading back to Colorado Springs because I fly in and out of there. And we got halfway home, and I said, oh, my God, Chuck, what happened yesterday? He goes, what? And we started repeating it. He goes, wow, He said, we just went home and went right to bed. I said, I mean, we went back to the hotel room and we were out cold and never thought about it until halfway home. It's a 7.5-hour drive back to Colorado Springs. And then we started talking about it. And he said, maybe whatever was where we were supposed to be, somebody didn't want us to be there. They were keeping us from being there. Or maybe they wanted us to be where we were and they wanted to meet up with us there. And I said, or maybe we did. I said, Chuck, we're missing even if you try and allow more time than we were spending on any of this, minimum, we lost an hour and a half.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So now I really want to go back to Roswell because we didn't go back the following year in 2018 because I think he was doing Alien Highway. And so he was filming. And then last year there was something that went on. But of course, this year, they canceled. We were going to go back this year for the festival and everything got canceled out because of COVID in 2000. Well, no, that's what it was. Let's see. No, 2020 at all. So we haven't been back since 17. And I don't know. Chuck keeps saying, well, I don't know. Maybe, we should probably go back or.
Well, this next year is going to be a good year because the vaccine will be fairly widely distributed, and then people will. I personally am going to really feel like getting out of the house and going to the MUFON Symposium.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And I am going to party, man.
Las Vegas in July. Absolutely. Everything should be under control by then. But that's my obsession with Roswell because something happened to us there twice. And that means that whatever originally happened, it's not over. There's something is going on in that area.
Have you talked to people that live in that area about that? Are there? I'm assuming that there are ongoing sightings, probably, of strange things happening at Roswell.
I looked at the CMS and it didn't seem like anything any more than usual. But I talked to a couple different people, the people that worked at the hotel, and I talked to somebody that was there at one of the little quick trip shops, and they said, we can't believe you went down that highway at night. I wouldn't do that. You couldn't pay me enough money to go down that highway at night. I said, you're kidding. It's just like a major highway. You swing around, you go past the Ragdale site, you end up right over by Corona. It's a highway. And the locals were saying, yeah, there's some pretty strange things happen on that highway. You couldn't get me on that highway after dark.
Holy moly.
But they're not reporting it. So that, as far as the Roswell 1947 incident, yes, that happened, definitely. When we found a piece of debris in 2002, a silver metallic triangle piece, it ended up being the property of the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. They were the ones that anything that you find like that on BLM property belongs to them. I think it's in a museum. My brother Chuck got it out of their holding for a while, had it analyzed. He had it analyzed first locally in Colorado Springs, and it was really pure aluminum with a little bit of silicon. Then he had it analyzed by Bigelow Industries a few years ago, and they took the tip of it off and came back with they had an email. They sent us an email that said that there was an unknown polymer. And we said, well, what do you mean about that? I mean, I didn't think there was anything that was unknown, if you got the money that Bigelow has. And
an unknown
we tried
polymer.
to pin them. Yeah, and we tried to pin them down, and they claimed they never said it, except I printed and copied the email. So
it was an unknown polymer. That's fascinating as well.
So we don't have any idea on that, except that a couple of years later he developed those inflatable things that the inflatable escape pods that leave out of the International Space Station. And we thought maybe there was something in there that was that one little element or the one little polymer or whatever it was that he needed, because we never got that little, the whole piece back. They had cut the tip of it off.
Weren't there some other materials that were discovered during that archaeological expedition? Weren't there some fibers found, some kind of fibers?
Yeah. Before we got there, the week before we got there, there was some kind of a glob orange substance that Dr. Bill Dolman, at the time, 22-year experienced archaeologist, he was the lead archaeologist on that from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he said he'd never seen anything like it out there. There were some fibers, some kind of a fibrous material. There was something green. They found material that looked like it might have been military material. Someone else found material that looked like it might have been off of the rubber off of military boots. When we went back in 2006, we dug up most of what we did in 2006. We were looking for the gouge. And so they were sifting. We were sifting, but we had a backhoe out there digging, trying to find, because this thing, when it came down, it kind of hit and skipped. And so they were thinking there might be a couple different gouges in the ground that the government had come and maybe covered up. And so they were looking for that.
So you could tell by the difference in the soils between the
right.
layer of soils where the gouge was and where it was filled in.
Yeah, they were hoping for that. But we dug up a part of a bridle, a horse bridle, and Chuck went back and researched it, and that piece of bridle was looked exactly like a bridle that would have been used by the military, a military horse. I mean, it wasn't a rancher bridle. It was something that, the military used, that type of bridle. And we thought, well, that would make sense because nothing would go across that area for about 2 years. I talked to one of the locals there, Mag Brazel's granddaughter, Fawn Fritz, and she said that that's the area that it happened in. They just know by looking at the landmarks. She said they know the area from, there's the windmill and there's the house and there's a sinkhole. And she said there wasn't a jackrabbit, a spider, a bird, nothing would go across that area. It was a 1/4-mile area. When they took and they were sheep herders more than cow. They'd take the sheep, they'd have to go all the way around that area. It was BLM property to have them graze because they wouldn't go over that area.
Wow.
So if you were in the military and you were trying to go over this vast area that takes, about 75 minutes to drive out there from Roswell, it took a whole heck of a long time, longer than that by, car and bad roads back in 1947. I'm sure they were out there with horses looking for things. And it would make sense if a horse didn't want to go across that area, they would buck up and maybe break a bridle. I mean, it makes sense if you're going to force a horse to go across an area that you can't get sheep to go across. Yeah. So, it's another piece of the evidence. It's like Stanton Friedman used to say, there's a whole lot of things that you discover and you're not really sure, but you put that in your grave file. It's just one more little piece of evidence that's something that the military was most likely there.
Yeah. Well, Debbie, we've reached the end of our time together. I'm so sorry because I really appreciate you being with me here tonight. I really do appreciate you being here, and it's really an honor to serve on the board with you. I'm glad that I've had this opportunity to be on the board with you, and it's been a real pleasure. We've known each other for a few years now, and I just appreciate everything you do for MUFON, and I'm really envious of your having sighted UFOs and of your extensive background in diving. I have a snorkel.
Hey, I snorkeled Alaska. We had a good time. I've also dove in Alaska, but I've snorkeled there too. It's been great being on. I appreciate it. I'm sorry it's kind of, we skipped around a whole lot, but there's so much out there. I'd be happy to come back and
that'd be great. We can talk again.
a little bit more on some of the things that happened. But thank you so much for having me on, and you're a great friend. Thank you. You ever come to Missouri? Hey, I'll take you out.
I'd love to.
I'll take you out and scare the bejeebers out of you.
All right. Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate it. And I'll be back in just a few moments with some afterthoughts.
You are not alone. Thousands of people all over the world have sightings of UFOs per month. MUFON is a place to report them. Since 1969, MUFON has been investigating UFO reports and providing this information to the public. Our aim is the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. Support UFO research. Join MUFON today.
You are listening to the official podcast of the Mutual UFO Network.
The world seems to be moving faster and faster. New revelations about UFOs and the potential for extraterrestrial life are flying at us at a furious pace. In light of our discussion with Debbie tonight, we may want to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be extraterrestrial? Are UFOs flying here from some other star system, or is there something else going on, something beyond our understanding? I have no doubt that Debbie will continue to use her vast experience and knowledge of UFOs to keep searching for the truth. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time right here on the official MUFON podcast.